I call the meeting to order and welcome everyone to the City of Kalispell August 5, 2024 council meeting. Can I have a roll call, please?
Councillor Hunter.
Here.
Councillor Nunnally.
Here.
Councillor Carlson. Councillor Gabrielle.
Here.
Councillor Graham.
Here.
Councillor Dowd.
Here.
Councillor Dahlman. Councillor Fisher.
Here.
And Mayor Johnson.
Here. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Graham, you think you can do this in English?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Your agenda in front of us. Look to council for approval. Mr. Dowd,
Your Honor, I move the agenda is published.
Second.
second. Thank you, Mr. Nunnally. All in favor of the motion signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. 3 items on the consent agenda this evening. The first item are the council minutes from the July 15, July 16, and July 22nd, 2024 meetings. The second item is award engagement letter for bond tax counsel. This item approves engagement of Ballard Spar LLP for bond tax counsel services. And the third item is approve agreement for wastewater treatment plant biosolids treatment disposal project. This item approves awarding advanced engineering and environmental services as the professional consultant for this project. Is there any public comment for any of the 3 items on the consent agenda? Look to council for a motion. Mr. Nunnally?
Thank you, Your Honor. I approve the motion, or excuse me, I make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Second. Thank you, Ms. Gabriel. All in favor of the motion signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. This time, I'd like to introduce Senator Bob Keenan. A little presentation tonight on the Behavioral Health System for Future Generations Commission report. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. I understand that you all have received this draft report. Is that true? Okay. I'll try to be as brief as I can, but I want to explain where we all are, because we're all in this together when you're talking about mental health, developmental disabilities, co-occurring, and how we got to where we are right now and what we're trying to do, as the mayor just mentioned. This report, the important thing is this is about future generations. This can't be fixed overnight. And I know I came to one of your meetings a couple months ago and it was standing room only, and I really regretted that I was selfish and thought, it's 10 o'clock, I'm going home. And because I really wanted to tell you some of the things that I will talk to you about tonight because of the issues that you're dealing with and we all are dealing with. Since last May, so over 14, 15 months, I've taken 2 laps around the state of Montana talking to people, and the timing is good, in my opinion. I was involved in the mental health mess in '99 after the Roscoe administration did mental health managed care. It didn't go well. But at any rate, I could talk for hours about this. I'm real passionate about it, and I think we have a great opportunity, and I want to present where we are to you. I think it will help you with 1 or 2 of your issues that you're dealing with. So anyway, how we all got to where we are right now. And don't worry, I'm going to scare you when I start talking about 60 years ago. I'll hit it real quick. But in 1963, John F. Kennedy signed his last bill that he signed. 3 weeks later, he was assassinated. On October 31st, Halloween, 1963, he signed, and this is obviously not politically correct in this day and age, but that's how long we've been dealing with this. He signed the Mental Retardation and Community Mental Health Centers Construction Act of 1963. Remember that Medicaid started 2 years later in 1965, which changed our world. I saw the first fiscal note that came to the legislature. I wasn't there then. And back then, it was probably in '67 or something like that. And in the fiscal note, it said long-term possible impacts, and it said that this Medicaid program could end up costing the state of Montana as much as $1 million a year. Obviously, we're at $1 billion and plus now. So mental health became an issue that President Kennedy took a run at through Congress. The goal, overarching goal that we're talking about and how it impacts now is to reduce institutionalization. We had 500,000 people institutionalized back in those days. We had I'll say hundreds because I know it was over 1,000, but I'll leave that alone. In Boulder, we had thousands of people in Gayland and in Warm Springs. It was a tragic situation that we found ourselves in. But Congress began that process. So you need to recognize that over the past 60, 62 or 3 years, we've made a lot of progress in deinstitutionalization. But as you know, that has taken those people and put them into the community in a least restrictive environment, and they're with us. They're in the streets. They're in the communities. Community support has not been adequate. That's why we have the situation. So in '99, the Olmstead decision, there were two ladies in Georgia who sued over their institutionalization. They won, and the Olmstead decision came down. Now, that's obviously least restrictive environment, community services. You obviously heard in the title, we were talking about community mental health centers. That's what we have. In 2004, we had the Travis D. lawsuit, which was a developmentally disabled individual that was in Glendive at Eastmont, was what it was called, and I was in the legislature for that. That was this century. But in 1997, the Roscoe administration went with a private managed care contract with Magellan out of Baltimore. It went terribly. And it was a 5-year contract, $400 million, $80 million a year, and it did not go well. I happened to be in a position where I had a deciding vote to cancel that contract. So then we had nothing, and I had John Hart from Evergreen chewing me out big time about, now, good move, what are we going to do? I said, well, give me some builder act requests and we'll rebuild the system. So we were able to do that. It helped that I was chairman of Finance and Claims in the Senate at the time, and then I was president of the Senate. So I could get things done during the Martz administration. So that ended on June 30th, replaced with a fee for service under the Martz administration. Then in 2000, so that ran along okay. Mental health systems are never going to be okay. They're dynamic and they're dysfunctional. But that's the nature, and we try to do the best we can as a society. But in 2017, in anticipation of revenue shortfalls, the administration cut provider rates. Well, you know, in budgeting, you can't cut K through 12. You can't cut the education generally. So usually the people get whacked are the people that are behind the DPHHS programs. So what that did is slowly, but eventually, and you've seen this, the community services imploded. During this time, which is something we're all dealing with now, mental health became behavioral health because you have substance use disorders. And we know that's rampant in our society. It's causing tremendous problems. You all know that. So we have homelessness. Now there's the magic word that I knew that you all would recognize. And there are many contributing factors to that. Not everybody that is homeless is mentally ill. That might be a generalization that shouldn't be acceptable. But the mental health centers through these provider rates were crushed. Well, what happens in the belly of the beast when a mental health system is bad is that the county jails become part of the mental health system. That's not a system. That's what we have going on right now. Flood is fairly fortunate that from Jen Ball, Jen Root is OPD. Jen Root will tell you that 10-11% of the people in the county jail have serious mental illnesses. So, and the hospitals, emergency departments, they get the pressure as well. So that's when things are bad, and that's where we are. So that puts pressure on the Montana State Hospital, which has a 225 or so capacity. That's for civil. Then you have 54 beds at the forensic for the criminal system in Galen. But there's tremendous pressure on that. So what happens, it gets backed up. I won't get into all the details with the sheriff transports back and forth, the fitness to proceed, the court-ordered evaluations are a big piece, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes. So after all of these years and things falling apart since 2017, and we have this implosion at the local level, we have House Bill 872, which the governor's office came to me in January of the last legislative session and asked me if I would help fix the mental health system. That's the only reason. I was termed out of the Senate. I felt like I'd done my deal, but I decided to come back for 2 years to the House because I had a feeling this was going to happen, and I'd been there, done that, and nobody else in the building was there in 1998, 99 when this all imploded because of term limits and retirements and things like that. So it happened, and the governor said, or I said, well, okay, what do you want to do? And they said, you did it before, we're not sure what to do. And that's not a criticism, it's a very difficult situation, and I don't know I think we have some answers. So at any rate, and he also said, no, by the way, I'm going to take $300 million and put it aside. And I said, well, I'm not going to spend $300 million on the system we have right now because that would last in the current Behavioral Health Developmental Disability Division of DPHHS. That'll last 6 months. That's not what we want to do, is just throw good money after bad. So 872 came, and you could read the report. We have had 10 meetings, 11 meetings, I guess now, but 10 meetings, 5 of which were around the state. We went to Great Falls, Havre, Missoula, Kalispell, where else did we go? Oh, Billings, maybe that's 5. At any rate, we had panels. We had over 40 panels, 4 or 5 people on a panel, sometimes a little bit more. So we had 175 subject area experts. Most important panel that we had at every meeting was families. That's what we try to do, because as a legislator, I represent people. I represent the constituents, like you have your constituents. And I look at the 3 Ps. We represent people in the legislature. The executive branch is about programs, and this is an overgeneralization. And the judiciary is an important part of that. And the Supreme Court Justice Mike McGrath called me up when he saw this bill and said, I'm all about it. And then he went off about the problems that they have in the judiciary system. So we had 3 branches of government, if I could get it passed in the legislature. When it's got a $300 million fiscal note, it's a little iffy, but we got it done. So at any rate, we've been meeting, we've been taking all this input, and we've been coming up with recommendations, long-term, and we had some what we call NTIs, which are near-term initiatives. Those are to plug the gaps, the holes in the systems as best we could right now. I say right now. I'm a businessman. Right now in government isn't right now. But okay, we're going to do the best we can, and I'll talk a little bit about some of those specifics. So I look through, we have 22 long-term, I'll call them, recommendations. We had 11 near-term initiatives, and they link together a little bit. Well, some of them link together a lot. Of the 22, and it's on page 22 of this draft report, I'll stop there and just say that this is a draft report. Last Tuesday, I had to make a presentation of this as it stands right now to 3 legislative committees. That's what it took to get the bill passed. I took any amendments. I was getting beat up left and right, and okay, put that amendment on the bill, just get the bill passed, because it's important. People across the state aren't afraid to talk about mental health now. It's not a comfortable subject necessarily. Get into the homeless thing, and you all have been there for that. So at any rate, of the 22 on page 15, I picked out a few that would be of interest to a city council and how they might help you in your community if we can get, providers taken care of. And we put a lot of money into provider rates this past session. Case management fell apart after 17. That's important. Having people have somebody, if they don't have family, whatever, and a lot of times, well, I'll get to that a little bit later. Number 8 is transition, and that's a word they use now. It's discharge planning from state institutions or the continuum of care, where people are coming down from crisis to subacute care and those kinds of things. What what that is establishing group homes. Because what's happening right now at the state hospital, and I know the department doesn't like me saying this, but it's the truth. I found out about it last May and I was outraged, and nothing changed. And finally, it became recognized that we don't like it, we don't look at it, we don't want to talk about it, but discharges from the state hospital oftentimes are to homeless shelters. God's Love in Helena, Rescue Mission in Billings. I don't know, I can't say that that's happening to Kalispell, but it is, we know that. It's just not specific. Another problem we have in statute is the file for that individual who has been stabilized and getting discharged from the state hospital. That file should be transported with that person to wherever they're going in 2 weeks. Well, that's unacceptable with electronic files and all of that sort of stuff. So anyway, we need to wake up. Number 11 has to do with receiving and stabilization. That's another thing I think that means something to you, that Missoula has recently opened up a receiving center. Receiving centers don't have beds, they have chairs. They're 24 hours or less of service. And it might be a detox situation, it might be an early diagnosis, but it's just a calming down position. Why 23 hours and 59 minutes? It's because of Medicaid regulations, and most of the people we're dealing with are Medicaid. Peer support, personally, that I've always felt like there was a need for that. It's not a high cost item and the professional level, and peers have been there, done that. Utah has a fabulous crisis response where they respond to crises. 2 people in a Subaru hatchback, civilian clothes. One is an LCSW, the other is a peer. So depending on the situation that they're going into, the peer can take over and say, look, I understand how you're feeling, I know, but it is the meds. We wouldn't be here right now if you got back on your meds, things like that. Or it could be a clinical thing and the LCSW takes over. So I think peer support's important. Number 13 has to do with homeless population. And we have work together, beginning to work together with the Department of Commerce on a fair market value, because we all know that real estate's gone crazy, so rent has gone crazy. So the Section 8 housing is terribly low, and people can't use that to get off the streets on a homeless. So that's one piece of that homeless population that we're trying to take care of. There's another one for peer support. We started this whole process, and I should have said this earlier, but my notes are scribbled around here, with 7 priorities the commission had, because we could be all over the map, as you can imagine. Number 1, we wanted to deal with crisis, and this is just a quick thumbnail thing. And we wanted to shift from the pressure on state hospital, the local hospitals, and the county jails. The 3 through 6 in our 7 priorities are having to do with capacity. We need to build the capacity to take care of these people. Number 7 is all about family and the caregivers and trying to give them some help. So I'm getting there. The other piece that we tried to plug some money in as quickly as possible, we called the near-term initiatives. We have 11 of them right now. I have 3 that I'll mention right now. The rest are in the book that may be of interest to you. One of them is court-ordered evaluations. They have to be done, or they're being done, and I've got issues with the judges sometimes about this, because they can in fact do it at the local level, but they don't want to, and they can't find providers to do it. Part of that is, the carrot and the stick with the providers to get them. If they want to present themselves as Mother Teresa, then live up to it and help us with this problem. That's your field. Let's get together. Let's work on an acuity rate-based pay schedule if we can, but that's the minutia here. Court-ordered evaluations are being done in Galen. That has 54 beds, 6 for women, 48 for men. It's backed up big time. And what that does is try to establish people who have a mental illness, get them stabilized so they have a fitness to proceed in their criminal situation. Transporting those people back and forth can be terrible because they get stabilized, they're fit to proceed, they get scheduled, they they don't have any meds, they don't have any treatment when they get to the hospital, so it's a revolving door. So we tried to put money into that. It didn't go well. The people in the courthouses, the judicial system, the sheriffs, the jail commanders, et cetera, they're too busy. They've got a 40-hour week. They're jammed. They didn't have time for this. So we took another approach where there's a gentleman in Missoula who's a psychiatrist. He has frontier psychiatry. He does telepsych. So we're going in that route. But do we have the environment for the patient, the inmate, whatever, that can be comfortable and get evaluated at the local level? And, how can we get providers to help them, the peer support, et cetera, when they're in a county jail and things like that? And you read in the paper and you can read between the lines and see what's going on. So we're trying to fix that court order evaluation. Judge Amy Eddy has been awesome helping me understand this stuff. I'm a retired fry cook. What am I doing all this stuff for? But at any rate, community residential beds were number 2. We had 136 proposals when we put out an RFP for them from all different size providers. They totaled like $30 million. When we narrowed that down to the eligible, people that were actually eligible to what we proposed, it cut it down to $15.8 million. So we started at $10 million, we added $5.8 million. These NTIs have to go to the governor. Sometimes that takes a couple of weeks for them to sort it all out and approve it. So we went to 15.8, and those awards are going to be coming out in the next few days. It's what do they call it, embargoed at this point in time. I know that we're going to be happy in Kalispell that we'll get some residential group home beds. If we can get the Glacier House opened up for a receiving center, it would be important for Libby, it would be important for us as well. But that's the community system that we're trying to build. We have to be patient, and it's difficult because I get a lot of phone calls from families that are telling me, hurry up. So community residential beds is an important NTI, and we're trying to get that going. And I think in the next, who knows, in the next week that'll come out. And then we try to focus on, like I was saying earlier, crisis response and then receiving. After receiving, which might be 24 hours, then you get to stabilization. And that can be 3, 5, 7 days. Then it's subacute, which is outpatient, or acute, which is institutionalization. Well, we don't want that, but let's face it. Despite the ACLU or the Disability Rights Montana, some people just need to be there for the safety of themselves and others. The process that we're in right now, we were going to have a meeting on the 8th, but that meeting that I had with the 3 legislative committees a week ago, or tomorrow, we got some input. And it was good input. Trying to establish baselines to find out outcomes and all that, inputs and outputs and all that sort of stuff, that some legislators are really into that. So, and that's cool. So we're going to consider that. So we canceled the meeting for the 8th, I guess that's Thursday, and it's going to be on the 26th. My offer to you tonight is, if you review this, if you see something, if you have anything, get in touch with me. We're past deadline, but I know some people, so we'll see what we can do. And this draft report, we're hoping to wrap it up and make it a final report, which then goes to the governor by September 1st. And we'll probably be continuing meeting, getting reports and seeing what's going on, maybe till October 15th. Let the department do the work. I can't tell you how amazing it's been, the Department of Public Health and Human Services. There's about 25 people that are working with this commission, and they're doing that above and beyond their 40-hour job that they do already. It has been fabulous. For me, after 16 years of administrations that would fire a state employee if they ever talked to a legislator, just clear your desk out, and that's real life. To be able to work with the department is fantastic. It's been absolutely fantastic. I never thought it had ever happen. So we're going to go through this process, and Mr. Mayor, there, that's it. We're trying, be patient. We'll get where we go. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Any questions for Mr. Hunter, you
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Keenan. That was excellent. I appreciate all the details. And you obviously have extensive knowledge on the topic and history. And I think your commitment to the issue is really driving a lot of this forward. And I appreciate that. My one question is, you talked about money for coming locally, the local centers, opening Glacier House. Announcement may be coming in a week. And I'm just wondering,
Never should have said a week, should I?
I'm gonna, it's on my calendar now.
Yeah.
But I'm just wondering, in terms of the money and getting the doors open at Glacier House, when would you anticipate something like that, roughly?
Okay. We were in Kalispell at FECC for a meeting. We were focusing on the developmental disability population or programs at that point in time. And after that meeting, I grabbed the director and a couple of his lieutenants, and we went over to the Glacier House. We went to that little campus down below on the hill, and we looked at it, and they were hugely impressed. And if we could have gotten them $200,000, we'd have been open on February 15th. It drives me crazy that we couldn't do that. I talked to Kyle Waterman at length about, can you guys get some financing, the money's coming. How do we get that open so that the crisis response teams have a place to take people besides jail or emergency departments? So how long does it take? 2 months. It ought to be up and running. Now, we can design the best programs all across the state, but workforce, need I say more? That's the challenge. Does that answer?
It does, thank you.
any other questions?
Representative Keenan, thanks for being here and giving us a report on this. I wasn't aware of a lot of these items that you were working on, and I appreciate that. There's, like you were pointing out in this, if you want to speak in terms of Kalispell and how what we see here, there's a vast vacuum, right, from the person on the street and the Samaritan House. Like that type of program. There's a vacuum there to get people stabilized and get people in there. I appreciate what the Glacier Center might be able to do for us. And I'm really encouraged by what you're doing here with those types of services. Are there other communities that are looking into co-responders like we have? Is that becoming pretty popular in the state, I'm hoping?
Yes. When we first started looking at it, we had 8 crisis response units around the state. The more rural you get, the more challenging it is, obviously. Billings works through the police department. Libby is an incredible example, a town of 3,000 people. There's a Vanessa Williamson, who's a community hero. It's amazing. She put it together up there, and she got 5 therapists that work together, and they do 24/7 response for Lincoln County at $56,000 a year. They take care of things. That's what communities can do. But what happens if Vanessa burns out? Man, there's burnout in this field. So Missoula does it through their fire department. John Petroff runs that program. They do really well. Missoula has a receiving center. Jeremy Williams works at Providence. He's an amazing person. It takes these amazing people out there that, dedicate themselves to this. So there are crisis response out there. We were looking, it's just hugely expensive. In Montana, we've been socially distancing for a couple hundred years, and we enjoy that. So we can't have a therapist on every corner or a mental health center in every town. I mean, that's the reality, and I have to tell people that people that live in Circle, they love Circle, but we can't provide these services. We don't have the tax base or whatever. So the hub and spoke model for some of these things would help. We've looked into as much as we can, but crisis response is hugely important. And then getting willing customers, if you will, people that are willing to help themselves.
So my last question would be, we have like a behavioral science unit here at community college, and it's pretty successful, but usually people graduate out of that course and then they're out of Montana because the wages for those positions are so low. Is there something being looked at to try to keep some of those fresh graduates?
Yes. The short answer is yes, and you'll see them in the 22 recommendations. We called the university system in OCHI, Office of Commissioner of Higher Education, and we talked to them about starting programs to increase the workforce. Part of our problem with workforce is you'll have recent graduates or whatever that'll work in the public sector and all of that. They'll get established and then they hang out a shingle and go private and don't take Medicaid. So then we have that void. I can't think it right. Incentivize providers to join the behavioral health and DD workforce. School-based is a focus of mine. I had a bill that was unsuccessful in last session. I got the $300 million one, but I couldn't get the school-based mental health. But that's hugely important. I get passionate about that, but I'll keep quiet. You'll hear about certified community behavioral health centers, which is the new flavor of the month for mental health centers. I think that's a few years away. Some of these recommendations that we have are going to have to be looked at by the 25 legislature and beyond. That we can't fix it. We're going to prioritize these 22 over the next couple of weeks, but that's not to say that we're going to throw any out. All 22 or 33 are important, and we hope to implement them.
All right, well, thanks, appreciate it.
Sure. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Keenan, for the work you've been doing on this issue and the time you've put in on it. It's been, I'm sure it's been a long time going around and doing all this. But a question that I have, and you might have already touched on it, so if you have, I apologize. But is there any discussion or information that you found out about the effectiveness of addiction treatment and how that goes towards mental health treatment or to addressing mental health?
Well, I'll answer this and hope this way, and hopefully it'll answer your question. I struggle with this right out of the gates because I always looked at substance use disorders. That wasn't in the game 25 years ago, and that's all new. And I'm thinking that's a choice. So do you have to be, in some ways, you have to be mentally ill to do meth, but people are self-medicating. So, or does meth cause mental illness? Well, it's all wrapped up together. So substance use is extremely difficult. We talk about stigma. And I got challenged by Representative Mercer, a former U.S. attorney for the state of Montana. He challenged me pretty hard about that when I talked about the improvements we've made over the last 60 years or the last 25 years with stigma. And he challenged me that we don't want to reduce the stigma on substance use disorder. It's wrong, and it's getting worse. We're legalizing, taxing things. We have to tax pot so we can pave roads so people can get to the dispensaries, I guess. I don't know. Now you know where I stood on that one. Anyway, does that help? Substance use is a big issue. There are a lot of providers. There are a lot of networks. After the I should be more careful, but I've never been careful. After COVID and the ARPA money and all the flooding of federal money into these kinds of places, there were some providers that let their guard down and thought, how are they ever going to keep track of this money? So there was some Medicaid fraud. So we've got some issues with that in the state of Montana as well. Another horrible issue along those lines. You heard about missing murdered Indigenous women. I was down in Maricopa County at Phoenix asking what their system is, because they got a good system, and Utah copied their system, and if we can do some of that, it would be great. But they'd use a lot of general fund money down there. But they have sober living homes. You got to be careful with them. That's Medicaid eligibility. And there are Native women that are kidnapped, abducted, drugged, transported to Arizona. And I'm going to say this number right, to the tune of $4.5 billion worth of fraud over the last few years. And why haven't we fixed that? I mean, it's horrible. Those kinds of situations are out there, and that's part of that, the trafficking and the substance use and things like that. So I'm
Well,
glad
and
I
think
got that.
probably when it comes to the substance abuse is, in its worst forms, it probably goes through and manifests itself into a mental health disorder to the average person, going and seeing it displayed out on the street. And so, and I, from my own family, personal history and stuff, I know that substance abuse can go through and cause mental health, problems and everything. So I was just hoping that maybe some of this was going through and attaching itself to addiction treatment to go through. Maybe the addiction treatment's the low-hanging fruit when it comes to the mental health aspect of it, because if you can get people out of addiction, then perhaps they're not going to be have that borderline mental health. So I just wasn't sure if there was a crossover with that or not.
We've talked a lot about prevention, and there's been through that ARPA money and federal grants and things like that, we have some prevention dollars, and the people that are doing prevention are passionate about their prevention. When I asked one time for a definition of prevention, little did I know what I was going to get. That was threatening, because those grants are going to expire and those people aren't going to have their jobs necessarily. Prevention needs to start with the K through 12 education. There are a lot of people. I talked to a lady from Missoula not too long ago. And she called me, she talked about her brother and alcohol abuse for teenagers, before they're 25, their brain development, things like that. And she said, my brother hurt himself. But those stories need to be told in elementary school.
To bring back DARE.
Pardon?
We need to bring back DARE.
DARE. Well, yeah, there are school programs. There's one called the Hope Squads. Kids that are in high schools or junior highs that are identified as having empathy for people. They're listeners. They're good people. It's not the quarterback or the cheerleader or whatever, anything. These are people that are identified, and they get training so that kids can approach them, and they have them. Hardin's got a really good Hope Squad. They do a lot of that in Utah. There are those kinds of programs that just need to get started so that kids know that there is somebody they can talk to, whether it's trouble on an athletic team, whether it's the bullying, or maybe trouble at home. We put Stillwater County and Park County put a lot of money in a Catalyst for Change, which is a program, and it went really well, except what they found was the kids that were exhibiting problems or trouble in school had it from home. So then they had to switch their focus, talk to the kids, and try to help them in their home, that they were bringing the trauma from things at home to school and acting out. The kid's a good kid, probably like I used to be, kind of okay, but in trouble. But it's amazing. We had legislative days a few weeks ago, and I had 10 or 12 legislators come up to me and say, hey, I appreciate what you're doing with the mental health thing. That's really cool. How can I help? Or they'd say, my mother did 3 stints in Warm Springs, and I feel like I need to help and I need to do something. And I told everybody, if you don't have something in your family, you are blessed. It's out there.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Mr. Nunley?
I thank you, Representative Keenan.
I appreciate your time.
I appreciate you coming and also inviting. I think Mark and I went up to one of your listening sessions up at Logan Health, and I really appreciated that time and
That's right.
learned some there. So always good to hear. My question is more around, I think you kind of hit on it a little bit. how do you feel the rest of your legislators are? Because 300 million is just the start in some of this. Do you feel that you have an uphill battle as you continue this, or as this passes on to future legislators?
Thank you. I'm optimistic that it was a challenge to get this bill passed. I think, maybe by 4 votes in the House. The Senate, my buddy put enough money into provider rates, and he kept getting bought off, and more money, and I wouldn't do that in the House. We're going for it and see what happens. And I think it was 56 or something like that. So we got it done. But I'm optimistic that people will see. Warm Springs is a very difficult situation. You're in a union situation. You don't have the workforce. You don't have the bed capacity, but least restrictive environment. You don't want that. So who would predict the legislature? I don't know. I chose not to file again. I want to get this thing going, and 1995 was a long time ago. It's been a nice ride, but I think I'm encouraged by what we're hearing. I traveled across the Highway 2. I had to, I'd drive 570 miles for a 3-hour meeting at Glendive, but that's what it takes. And I called a friend of mine who was in the legislature a long time ago. He's farmer, rancher. And I'd been in touch with him quite a lot, but not about this, because, he has 2 right wings. He's conservative. Mm-hmm. And he told me, he says, he let his guard down. He says, I really appreciate what you're doing, that mental health stuff. I said, well, I'm glad to hear that. He says, my grandpa was everything to me. And when I was 8 years old, he was gone. He committed suicide. What I think we need, and I was at St. Luke's Hospital last Thursday, whatever it was, and in hospitals they have clergy that go around in the hospitals. They need to be trained so that when they're in front of their flock or their congregation, they know what to look for, because people aren't loners. People that are struggling mentally, they identify themselves if you know what to look for. Well, in that situation, bankers need training. They know farmers in eastern Montana that are struggling. They might lose the family farm they've had for 3 or 4 generations or whatever. And so they should know to look for that. The suicides in ag are astounding. So legislature, who knows? It's always a crapshoot.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you coming.
I appreciate your time. Don't ever invite me back, because I'll stay all night.
Okay, we're going to move on to public comment. Anyone wishing to address the council on items not on the agenda this evening or asked to step forward, state your name, and give your comments. Welcome, Mr. Waterman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Council. I'm Kyle Waterman. I've sat up here with you before, but right now my current responsibility is being the board chair for Western Montana Mental Health Center. Thank you, Representative Keenan, for your work and leadership. I thought it would be helpful just to give an update about Western as one of the mental health providers that provides our services, these services here locally. Representative, you've done an amazing job leading on these conversations. They are very hard and difficult. To talk about what Western does and what our campus does, so Representative Keenan talked about Glacier House and about our campus. So we would be one of the benefactors of some of these changes, and actually some of the changes that have already been done in the legislature. So I think to a question that was, how long does it take to ramp these up? Last year, the legislature thankfully reappropriated money back to case management, and we have been able to hire case management back here into the Flathead. That's our Path and PAC team, so sort of do our outreach into the community, but also for those who are in housing. It took us a while to staff up to be able to do that, but now we have about 80 clients who are in our homeless outreach, or the PAC team, which is going out. So it does take a while. As we talked about, there's a pipeline issue. You need to recruit the staff. They should be, I believe, paid saintly money, but they are good, hard workers. you have to be able to recruit them, get them out there. You have to get them certified. Opening up a house also takes a while. We are paid as an organization generally in the rears through reimbursements. So it takes us the startup costs. That would be the challenge. Just a little bit of a correction. We throw around Glacier House as a term of something that we should open up here. Western has actually applied for the NGO, so some of that short-term money. So look forward to hearing from you next week. That has actually been for our Glacier House to open up as a crisis house. That would be closer to Pathways, which would be a 72-hour group home facility. We think at Western that it's actually really important not only to have a stabilization unit, which is the 24-hour unit that Representative Keenan talks about, but after 24 hours that there might be another step up. And then further step ups, we also have that larger step up program, which is called the Lamplighter, which would be a rehab program. Just an update about our campus and where we are and some of the partnerships that we are working on. So one, we have Glacier House. We are hoping that maybe we can get that opened up into a 72-hour facility. Western does operate operations down in Missoula, and we do have the receiving center, and they're happy to sit and talk with anybody about what that 24-hour facility looks like, or provide a tour if you are down in Missoula. I think that would take us a longer time to be able to have that type of stabilization here in the Flathead, just because larger cities like Billings has had a stabilization unit for about 15 years. Helena, Missoula are now starting to size those up. They're not a like kind size. We'd have to find the right scale of the organization here. But stabilization is a secured facility where individuals are brought in and medically assessed, but also really de-escalated so that then they might be able to move into the step-up programs. So overall, what does Western provide? I'm going to go to Chad's sort of question. Mental health, behavioral health. Mental health is sometimes your anxiety disorder, your bipolar and depression. So those are sort of you're born with mental health issues. You might then self-medicate, as the representative talked about, and those are your behavioral health issues. Sometimes your behavioral health issues actually lead back into mental health issues. Western's specialty is co-occurring, working with both of those issues at the same time. Those are the type of services we provide. If somebody was looking for just rehab facilities, we might send them over to like Oxytocin, which actually now receives the county's alcohol and tobacco's funding, and they're doing primarily just the behavioral health side of things. But we would work with them in that, and we do that here on campus. We are also partnering with another mental health center, which is called Many Rivers, based out of Great Falls. We're actually going to have them opening up office space in our facility so that our facility is fully being utilized for its office spaces that we have, but also to watch both of our organizations' costs. We both don't need to have office spaces here when we're providing like-kind services, so that's a partnership. We also provide 988 services, so that's the call center, which is down in Missoula. So call centers, and just having a 3-digit number has taken a while to size up in the state of Montana. We have 3 of them. Western operates this region's call center. That gives us a 24/7 provider to call who has received counseling and training and can then work with our co-responders and do warm pass-offs locally. So Western provides that. We do the PATH and the PACT. That's sort of the case management outreach teams. We also have treatment, which would be like Lamplighter, a treatment facility. We do the group homes and crisis management. So I think that as a provider, we are thankful to be working with the commission and watching what some of these short-term initiatives have been providing. As an organization, I've been, since being on board chair, working on some restructuring. I started at the top and worked my way down with some restructuring in our C-suite, being able to make sure that we got providers provided first, and working on some just cultural changes, but also just efficiency changes. I believe that there's actually a lot of problems on the street, so there's plenty of work for us to find out. The legislature is coming up with some solutions that will help us open up, but we should be able to run our business efficiently and do our work and do more work in the community. So that's where Western is. We look forward to hearing about the initiatives. Love to hear your feedback. If there's questions about the 22 recommendations are really amazing what they were able to pull together. It is, I think, innovative when it comes down to technology. I do think that sometimes we have to use telemedicine. Not the biggest fan myself, but it is just where we live. We live in a rural state, so we have to be able to be creative, but we also have to be able to make sure that we work in all of our communities. So to me, it's like not just that Western is in Missoula, it needs to be here, it needs to be in Libby and at Thompson Falls. I mean, that's sort of the whole network of making sure that we have services. So we are working on doing that. It does take time, but I do actually want to thank the legislature for the work that they're doing and Representative Keenan to make sure that things are coming out. It's going to be slower to deliver than, it's not an overnight solution, but it's coming along. And I do think that there are some really great solutions within these packages. So Western looks forward to doing that, but also looks forward to working with City Council and with Flathead County, where we regularly are meeting. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Waterman.
Hi, I'm Carlene Osorio-Core. I'm the member manager of Lalark LLC, which owns property on Main Street in Kalispell. When I went to Gonzaga University, and I don't know if this is true for Mark, as we do have a little bit distance in age, our classmates would have different majors, but our minors were always double, philosophy and theology. And there was one question that was brought up in both classes. And this is the scenario. You're in a boat, and there is a sea of drowning people around you. Who do you save? Who do you pull into your boat? Do you pull the men? Do you pull the women? Do you pull children? Do you pull brunettes, blondes? The answer is the same in the philosophy class and the theology class. You pull into your boat the people nearest to the boat. The theology will say because they are your neighbor. And in a way, when you ran for office and you are sitting in these seats representing these wards, you're representing your neighbors, first and foremost, and then the greater neighborhood of Kalispell. I'm sorry that I wasn't here when you had the marathon about the warming center, because that is a neighborhood question. And I know that Chad Graham in his ward has heard many things from his neighbors. I have heard from his neighbors because I'm a business person, and there are some businesses in that ward that I do business with. And when they tell you their stories of how difficult it has been for them to have the warming center in their area, your heart goes out to them. But then I look at my ward. My ward is Main Street Kalispell. And Main Street Kalispell has not had a good relationship with the warming center. We've had a lot of homeless people at the library. We've had homeless people at the church behind the library. We've had homeless people in Depot Park. We've had homeless people going up and down Main Street. I've written you many letters about how the homeless have interacted in my business. Our building, which has a beautiful alcove area, we can no longer decorate. If we put out benches, the homeless sleep there. If we put out potted plants, they use them. And so we've had to take these things away. We've had to put in video equipment. Usually video equipment is on the inside of the building, not on the outside. Now we have to put it on the outside. 3 weeks ago, I had to call the police to come to the building because shopping carts and large umbrellas were in that beautiful alcove because someone decided that was a good place for them to spend the night. So when I look at those instances and I look at the warming center, I ask myself, when did these things start happening? And they did start to happen with the warming center. And unlike the programs that Senator Keenan, well, retired senator, but he's never retired. He's always working. That isn't what the warming center does. In one way, the warming center is the cruelest thing we can do for homeless people, for people who have mental problems, with people who have addiction problems. It's a very cruel thing. It's like throwing a bone to a pack of dogs. There are only so many beds. You're lining up tonight to see if you're going to get a bed. If the warming center were a full-fledged shelter that provided other services that would actually extend a hand, something to help these people move out of that situation, it would be more amenable to this community and to your neighbors. And one other thing I would like to point out, I don't know how many years ago it was, but I was on the planning board. And at that time, Tom Jentz was the director, and he always liked to give little 101 classes on planning. But a conditional use permit, the definition is inherent in the words. You're creating conditional uses because you want it to accommodate and meld in some way and be acceptable in the community and not have a negative impact. The warming center has a negative impact because it is not in any way solving this problem. It's contributing to the problem. And when you have folks that are tourists that don't know our little town run into your building and ask if Kalispell is safe, you can hardly believe it. But it's because somebody's walking up and down the street yelling obscenities or behaving in a manner that, obviously illustrates that they are not well. And this makes people worry about their safety. So I know this is something that might be on your agenda again in September, but I'd really like you to think about the definition of conditional use permit. I'd like you to think about your neighbors and how they are dealing with this and how difficult it is for business and for people who live in a neighborhood with a warming center, and how impossible it is for the homeless people to have to fight for a bed. This is not the kind of program anyone should be putting their dollars into, because it's not solving the problem. Now, I know that many folks spoke to you that are not your neighbors, that they enjoyed their volunteer work there. And I'm glad for that, but I think their volunteer work could have more value if it really contributed to solving the problem. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any other comment?
My name is Jaden Weppel. I live west of Kalispell, on West Kalispell. Is this the proper forum? I got here a little late. I just came here right off of work. Is this the proper forum to talk about the Main Street Safety Action Plan, or
That's
later?
coming up on the agenda.
Okay. In that case, I'll just make some general non-agenda remarks, if that's all right. Seems obvious to me that the cruelest thing we could do to our neighbor is not give them a helping hand, but to leave them out in the dark, possibly to die, as members of our community did before the opening of the warming center. I think that stands to reason. I think that stands up to scrutiny. And I am a neighbor. I live at the corner of 4th Street and Meridian, and I'm also a volunteer. And when I have volunteered at the warming center, and when I have spent that time healing someone's feet, preventing them from getting infection that causes them greater pain and suffering, I felt that was a good use of my time. If nothing else, it improved my own sense of self and improved the fact that I was lending a hand to my fellow humanity, to my fellow neighbors, and to my community. And so I would just like to have that be part of the record as well. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other comment? Okay, seeing none, we're going to move on to the first item this evening. I guess first and only item, Resolution 6213, Main Street Safety Action Plan Adoption and Project Identification. This resolution considers adopting this plan as an addendum to the Kalispell Move 2040 Transportation Plan and identifies projects for US DOT implementation and demonstration grant programs. Staff presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Your Honor and council members. I am going to hand over the presentation and staff report to Jared Nygren, our Director of Development Services.
Yeah, good evening, Mayor and Council. The agenda item before you is Resolution 6213. As the mayor stated, it's a resolution that would formally adopt the Main Street Safety Action Plan as an addendum to the Move 40 Transportation Plan. This study was actually called out in the transportation plan. It even goes back further than that, the downtown plan, the downtown urban renewal plan, the core area plan. So this is just a tool to implement a lot of the visioning documents that have been put forth in the past. The council did, I don't have a formal presentation here, although I do, if there's questions, have the plan here. We held a work session on this and also a public hearing in July. I would like to add really some of the primary comments that came about back in July were in regard to the first avenues and the trees. We did put together a new section. It is not the intent to remove trees with that road section, but we did put a new section together just to address that comment, which can be added into the plan if the council so chooses, because the draft before you does not have that. But if you choose to include that, a motion to do that would be in order. The adoption of the Main Street Safety Action Plan, which is a community-specific framework for applying the safe system approach to transportation corridors. This plan identifies vision and goals for transportation safety, identifies high crash and high risk intersection and streets through data analysis and community input. Spent the last couple months working in a community, putting this together. Using the safe systems approach with our consultant Kittelson's Associates, who's also on Zoom if we have any questions regarding that. The action before you also includes project identification. It is called the Main Street Safety Action Plan because that was really the focus of the grant, but knowing that the planning grant, I should say, but it looked at a much larger network and identifying potential safety issues throughout the city, which will be a great planning tool moving forward. This is the first step of the planning grant. If council does select projects, the second phase of the planning grant we received would actually go into up to 30% design of projects. Which then would be applied for in FY25 under the implementation grant, Safe Streets for All implementation grant. There is also another grant opportunity out there that we've included. It's called the demonstration grant program. It's actually due at the end of the month. And based off of the plan before you, we've come up with a number of projects identified with that as well, which are outlined in the memo. Those consist of leading pedestrian interval improvements throughout a number of areas, primarily in the core of town. Oregon Street improvements, which has been talked about quite a bit previously at the council level, and Fifth Avenue West as priority projects for the demonstration grant program. And that would be due at the end of the month. The projects would include things such as curb extensions, rectangular rapid flashing beacons, pedestrian hybrid beacons, high visibility crosswalks, mini roundabouts, always stop control, and leading pedestrian control improvements, which on the map in your memo are those orange dots. So that would really include intersection improvements just to make those intersections more safe, including for ADA accessible, so they would actually have voice activation and things if you're visually impaired. Once again, these are all just proven safety methods by federal highways, and happy to answer any questions and go from there.
Any questions for staff? Seeing none, any public comments on Resolution 6213?
Hello,
again. My name is still Jaden, and I still live in West Kalispell. And I would like to encourage, as I have continued to encourage council through this public comment process, to consider or to move to adopt this addendum to the Move 2040 plan for Kalispell. I think that as was stated as we were in the run up to this, that this is a part of a number of, that this Main Street Safety Action Plan falls in line and has been reiterated in parts or in whole through a number of studies looking at both the downtown area as well as the greater Kalispell area. And so for those reasons, I would ask that council move to add or make an addendum to the 2040 Move plan that includes the Safety Action Plan. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Everybody's pointing at me. Hi, I'm Nancy Easley. I live on Woodland Avenue. So I have great hopes for this plan. Oh, your battery's almost dying. I have great hopes for this plan. There's a lot of really wonderful things that are happening here. There's a lot of safety stuff and things that are going to be fantastic, but I bet you know where I'm going. So as a resident of Woodland Avenue, I have a lot of concerns about the portion of the plan that is intending to connect Woodland to Idaho and the safety issues that are going to get wound up in that. So I was reading through, I'm not sure if the city made this website. There's a Main Street Kalispell plan.com. Is that a city plan? Okay, I was reading through some of the notes about the reasoning for why Woodland should be connected to Idaho. So one of the reasons listed was park access, which is interesting because I think there already is a lot of park access if that's referring to Woodland Park, because it can be accessed from 2nd Street. It can be accessed directly from Idaho by the baseball fields already. I don't know that connecting Woodland Avenue straight through to Idaho really improves that or changes that very much. Another comment on that little sheet mentioned that it would improve access to commercial portions of town, which also is a little unclear to me. I've lived on Woodland Avenue for 17 years, and I've never felt disconnected from the commercial sections of Kalispell. It also mentioned the concept of doing it sort of for the purposes of complete streets. It would complete the street, which concerns me because I think maybe somewhere along the way, someone intentionally did not complete that street to preserve that neighborhood safety and not create a thoroughfare. So I don't know if just doing it for the sake of completing streets is important. But my biggest concern is in the paragraph where it mentions that completing Woodland would provide an alternate route to Main Street, which is not what Woodland was built for. Main Street was built to be Main Street with entirely commercial use, and it can handle lots of traffic. Woodland is a majority residential street, so I don't know that treating it as an alternate route to Main Street makes any sense to me. It seems dangerous. If the council does decide to go through with it and not make an addendum to maybe just take that portion out and reevaluate it, which I would love if they would take that portion out and reevaluate just the Woodland Avenue connection part. If you decide to move forward, neighbors and I were discussing some concerns about the weight limits on Woodland Avenue and semi-traffic that would potentially start going down Woodland Avenue if it was a main thoroughfare. I believe right now there's no semi-traffic permitted on that street, so that would be great if that would stay that way. And the pedestrian traffic on Woodland is a little bit dicey right now. So that is the one portion of your plan that I do like, was that there was discussion of actually getting that roundabout completed and doing it in a safe way, putting in higher visibility crosswalks and curb improvements, all of those things, adding the shared use path. All those parts of that plan sound great. My main concern is it becoming the east side bypass in the minds of Kalispell residents. Even though it wasn't intended to be an east side bypass, we know our neighbors and we know that when they have a fancy way to get around town, they're going to take it. So those were my main concerns. Thanks for letting me vent them.
Thank you.
Hey, all, Philip McDonald, 405 Fifth Avenue East. I think to Nancy's comment in regards to just coming and going to get on Woodland to go on to Idaho, whether you're coming or going, the side streets like 4th Street Ave, I always get this confused, across, that, where I am on the corner, it's an emergency route from the fire station down to Woodland. We have speeding all the time. No offense to the police department, even the police department will speed down without lights on. So my worry is regardless of side street, how it feeds into Woodland, over to Idaho and vice versa, over to Maine, there's going to be more traffic, there's going to be more speeding, and I think that's just a disservice to the residents of that side. So that's all I wanted to add to that.
Thank you, sir.
Hello, thank you for the work you do. My name's Kathy McKay. I also live on Woodland, like Nancy. And I'm concerned as well about the proposed connector from 7th Avenue East North to Woodland, because I think it would become an east side bypass. North-south traffic would use it. And I have 3 safety concerns. One is the pedestrian crosswalk from Conrad Mansion to the public restrooms. These concerns are related to increased traffic and possibly increased speed on Woodland. Another concern of mine is all the pedestrians and runners and bicyclists who use Woodland Avenue. And then the third concern is very local. It's based on where I live, which is between 7th Street and 8th Street. And I don't know if you know, but that's a deer travel corridor. They come up from the slough to the east and cross Woodland slowly, with sometimes with great difficulty because of the traffic. And in fact, last year, a doe was hit and killed directly across from my driveway. So because of these safety concerns, I would ask that this particular connector be removed from the proposal, from the transportation plan, and that Woodland Avenue could remain more of a residential street. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I'm Hugh Easley, also live on Woodland, also live with Nancy. I'm a dad. My kids and our neighborhood kids are many evenings we'll actually go play at capture the flag at the local parks. It's easy for them to walk to the parks. It's very casual. It's safe. I am worried about the traffic that some of this can bring. However, I'm also a runner, a bicyclist, and a dog walker. So I'm a fan of a lot of these ideas to improve the sidewalks visibility. So I just think there just needs to be some moderation. I'm just really worried about that Woodland corridor, bringing that traffic right through, and it's to be the east side bypass with very little oversight. It'll be dangerous for all of the above. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other comments? Okay. Look to council for a motion. Ms. Gabriel?
Thank you, Your Honor. I would move resolution number 6213, a resolution of the City of Kalispell, Montana, to enact a Main Street Safety Action Plan as an addendum to the Kalispell Move 2040 Transportation Plan, and to identify priority projects for the U.S. Department of Transportation implementation and demonstration grant programs in the City of Kalispell.
Second.
Second, thank you, Mr. Dowd. Discussion on the motion. Bob, do you want to speak to your motion?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Thank you.
Mr. Dowd, do you want to speak to the second? And then I'll go to Mr. Dowd.
Okay, yeah, I'd like to first off address I've been called a few times about the trees and the removal of them, and it's not even my ward. So I would.
You are the duck guy, though.
That's true. I would ask that we could treat the due diagram as a friendly modification to the document, or do we have to go through a formal,
I think we'd make an amendment to amend
formal
that.
amendment?
So do you have,
You could do a friendly amendment, a motion to include the new section for First Avenue West and East, that includes the trees, and then we'll make sure that that would be in the final draft, or the final plan if it's adopted.
Okay. I'm concerned that if we don't put that in there, there's going to be more confusion, so I would be in favor of amending it that way.
to be in favor of a friendly amendment, Ms. Gabriel?
I would.
Anything more than that, or are you good with a friendly amendment like that?
We're good.
Good, okay. So, original motion with the friendly amendment. Other
Okay.
discussion?
The second part is, even if these go into our plan, it's still going to be up to the council for each piece of this, each project as it comes up and what order we do them in, correct? And if that is the case, then at the time, projects can be altered as well if the council sees fit. I'm just trying to, I use Woodland quite a bit myself, and I'm also not in favor of it connecting up. I don't see, I like that it doesn't connect up because it keeps people from using it a little bit more than they're using it. And as somebody who lives off of Willow Glen, which has become the east side bypass, I do not want to see that happen to Woodland. So I'm in favor of including all of this in our plan, but just realizing and making sure the public's aware that when we get to any one of these projects, the order the projects come into play, and the way the project is either completely done as per the plan or altered is still a council decision.
Mr. Hunter?
Thank you, Your Honor. Yeah, I strongly support almost all the plan. I think it's excellent. All the different measures for pedestrian, bicycle safety, and inclusion of traffic calming. The fact that it extended beyond the main street and looked at a broader scope, I really like that happened. So much of it is just taking great ideas about safety issues and applying them locally. It's something I've really wanted to see, and I'm glad to see it. As I've spoken to, I have been opposed to this idea of the extension of Woodland to Idaho. Support all the other, as mentioned in the comments, all the other measures to Woodland for safety, support all the rest of it, but that connection, I think, doesn't make sense. One, because it is a residential street, and we've heard in public comment kind of the impacts and the safety concerns about increased traffic on Woodland and the safety impacts that could have. And I can't remember where I heard it, but I did hear, a comment at one point that there wasn't an expectation that would greatly increase traffic because of the roundabout that is proposed at Woodland and First, I believe it is. I believe that roundabout may slow traffic, but I don't think there's any realistic expectation that it would prevent this kind of increased traffic of that faster connection to Idaho. I don't think that's realistic. And one thing that wasn't mentioned in public comment about that connection that I don't like is we put millions of dollars into the Parkline Trail. And I truly believe that the best part of the Parkline Trail is right there as it extends from 4th to above Woodland, not only because of the views from there, but also it's the longest distance between trafficked roads. And so you get the furthest away from that traffic noise, that need to cross, and that makes for a better trail. Anytime you break up a trail with crossings, road crossings, that's just a hindrance. And as a trail user, I don't like it. And I know other trail users don't like it anytime you have to cross a road. So introducing another crossing, I don't think would make sense for that trail. So given that, and a point taken, Mr. Dowd, about the the fact that at a later date, we could always change our plans, but I do think there's momentum that gets built. And putting in the plan kind of gives that signal at a future date when we do consider it. I've heard the argument before where I've tried to oppose things not necessarily related to this, but then I would tell, well, it's in the plan, and the plan's been around for a long time, so how are you opposing this? Paraphrasing there, but
Very accurate.
Yes, I've heard it many times. So I could very much imagine at a future date if we ever did get this plan proposal before the council and we, tried to go for
I'm
a
sensing
change.
an amendment.
Yes. I like to make my case for the amendments before I make the actual
I kind of
amendments.
like the amendment and then make your case, but,
But if I don't get a second, then I don't get a chance to make that case.
sometimes you don't get.
All right, so you've heard me, you know what my position is on this. So I do move to amend the plan to exclude the connection Woodland to 7th Avenue there to Idaho.
Second. Motion second. And you already spoke to your motion.
No, I already spoke it. It's all out there.
Any other discussion on that amendment?
I totally agree. I think it should be killed now before money is spent on it, plans are made, and totally agree with Mr. Hunter.
So to clarify, is the project being removed or just the connection?
The connection.
Not the other, all the other stuff on Woodland is fine.
Just the road
Yeah, it's
connection.
just the connection.
Mr. Medley?
Thank you, Your Honor. I have to agree with the Easleys and others that spoke about this on connecting the east side, but I also understand the whole discussion through the park line. We had a divided city, and it was one of the things that was how do we reconnect north to south. So by taking out those north to south connections, are we going to find other north-south connections to replace if we take this one out? Because we're kind of going against what that whole was.
And I will, and Ms. Gabriel, you've probably heard this many times, connection through there with your time on the council, but my recollection when we were working on the park line, the core area development plan at the time, we were looking for north-south connections as part of that grant. So we were looking for different areas, and this is one of the areas identified, and we heard from the neighborhood at that time. I still remember, I think Mr. Jensen said, look, we've talked to these people, and the neighbors that live there, and we know they don't want it. I look at those past comments we've made and not putting that connection in. My concern, as you say, Mr. Hunter, the minute it goes in the plan, it's in the plan. And then at that point in time, oh, sorry, it's in the plan. I'm actually in favor of Mr. Hunter's motion in the second, largely from the standpoint that when we changed 3rd and 4th, we were trying to make them more residential. They were a bypass. Now we're getting people wanting it back one ways again, and I'm resisting that because I want them to be residential. I don't want to lose that east side residential flavor or feel. I understand the need potentially for north-south connections, but I also understand maintaining the integrity of neighborhoods. It's also why I oppose so much a lot of the things that the legislature did to us in the last session. How do we interject and destroy our neighborhoods with, oh, duplexes anywhere you want, ADUs anywhere you want? Never mind what your neighbor says or what they bought into. I think the people that have lived there, this is what they bought. And I'm very concerned that if we add this into the plan at this point in time, it's kind of a bait and switch. I know you bought there, you made a great investment. Sorry, we're gonna put a road in. And by the way, it's gonna be 3 lanes with a turn lane, and it doesn't make any sense to me. So I'm in favor of the motion to amend. Mr. Graham?
I would agree with what you said. But I do also think that when we did the park line, that one of the things was the north-south, but I can get around that. I think the way it currently exists, there's enough of a access to go through if people are wanting to get from, on the east side, if they're wanting to go through and get over to Idaho, you go down around Woodland Park and everything. It's a little bit out of the way and everything, but it's still doable. You don't have to go through downtown Kalispell. And that being that it is just a little bit more out of the way, maybe it goes through and keeps people from using it or overusing it in that area. So I do know that a connection right there would make things, it would make things a lot easier for in that area. You don't have to go around, but sometimes having a little bit of friction in an area might be a good thing too. So I'd support it.
Again, just to add in support of everything Mr. Hunter said, living in the neighborhood, driving it almost every day, people are already going 45 miles an hour down that. It's already being used way too much for how that road is built. The deer, the neighborhood, school nearby, parks, trail, it would become so overused if this happened. I just totally strongly support everything Mr. Hunter said.
And just one addition on the thought about the north-south connection is I would support a bicycle pedestrian north-south connection there. I think that would be a good connection. So I think even just switching in the plan from a road connection to a bicycle pedestrian north-south would be a good option there.
I like that.
So I could do a friendly amendment to my motion.
Sausage.
Okay, any other discussion? Ms. Gabriel?
I see everybody's point. But I don't think, I think we're fooling ourselves if we think people aren't already using it as bypass. I use it all the time. And it's just a 1 block jog out of the way. So I don't see this opening that up. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. And the other argument about it being residential / commercial, that's what first and second and third are. They're commercial until they get to residential. So, and I don't know, I struggle with it because I don't want to destroy that neighborhood either, especially with the historic part of it. So I'm inclined to support it as well, as long as we aren't digging ourselves into a hole. So I'm going to ask Mr. Nygren, are we digging ourselves into a hole if we do this? Or would we be better to readdress, is there a language we could use to readdress this later and put this one off for a long time?
So the plan in of itself, this is not, it's a project in here. It is in the plan. It's actually in the growth policy, and the growth policy wouldn't allow it. So it would require a growth policy amendment in the future, which is a whole nother public process. Absolutely, you could potentially, if you take it off the table, it's there for a reason. When the core area plan went into place, it was a #1 connector in the public by like 80%. Other than that neighborhood, rightfully so. It's got 100 feet of right of way. It's got a lot of reasons. It was on the edge of town that you would make that connections. It's got a lot of reasons you wouldn't. A lot of the improvements that are going in here with this project are actually identifying a lot of the issues we're hearing, other than the connection part, the speeding, the pedestrian connectivity, this plan addresses all that. So yeah, you would never want to just make the correction and do nothing, or the connection and do nothing to the road. But if you did the connection, what kind of improvements would you do to the road? In a new subdivision, you would be requiring this connection, absolutely. So it's certainly an issue in that neighborhood. The community as a whole, we talked about neighbor versus community as a whole. This is a connection that probably should be made. That neighborhood maybe thinks otherwise. A member on our stakeholder group lives in this neighborhood. I used to live in the neighborhood, so I'm well aware of it. So yeah, any future funding or anything that may come forth, traffic's not going to get less. It's only going to get more. So traffic's going to continue to go into this neighborhood. It's going to continue to go on this road. And, you know, there is a number of improvements going in place that will control traffic. That roundabout at Second, there's proposed roundabouts here. But so yeah, I mean, potentially in the future, it's not going to go away. It's a pretty logical extension connecting the roads, but that also creates concerns because it may be a traffic driver. So it's definitely.
and I understand where you're coming from. My whole concept on an east side bypass is not right on the edge of that east district. It was really looking at Willow Glen and how do we connect that through? And there's still only hope. But I understand the other side of this that I look at is also look at long-term, what are the impacts on the tax base? And dare I say, that's how we generate the revenue to deliver services. And our number one priority, in my opinion, is protecting the tax base. Not necessarily making sure people get through it fast, but protecting the values of what we have for real estate and the investment that people make there, because that's how we generate the revenues to deliver services. So I'm, like I say, I've always been the guy looking 40, 50 years down, don't make a decision I'll regret. I can say by removing this, I don't know that I would ever regret that decision, because my concern is by allowing something in a plan, do you detrimentally impact what is a tremendous asset for Kalispell at this time? What is the long-term impact? So, just my opinion.
So can I just get a little clarification, where are we standing right now? It's the road connection is what we're talking about bringing out. We would have the possibility of a future sidewalk, bike path, and all the roundabouts and traffic calming down.
It's just the road from.
It's just that
7.
little piece of road on that north end, Okay.
Is that like?
And making that a path connection instead of a road.
We pull it
Okay,
back up by chance, so we could maybe clarify
Yeah.
exactly what you're talking about. If I might interject, one of the other items that we may want to consider is, as we look at this plan as a whole, we're looking at making improvements in treatment to the downtown corridor. Traffic will have to go somewhere, so no matter what, you will be putting traffic elsewhere. Like, whether you want to acknowledge it or not, but traffic will move to other areas of the city as we do these improvements to Main Street and to First. And so that north-south connection is actually a pretty important part of this safety action plan. So I think maybe removing it and not giving it a chance later on to review what that might mean for the community, it might be a little bit detrimental, but again, that's up to council to consider as a part of that.
I'd just say, I mean, one, just as we could deny it in the future, we can also put it back in if we really determine there's like all sorts of problems and there's a change in feeling about it. But I also don't want to pretend like there's not a connection from Woodland to Idaho. There is. You just have to go around a few corners. And that is enough of a deterrent that visitors who are looking at a map and they're like, how's my fastest way to Glacier or Columbia Falls or something, or maybe they're having Google tell them where to go, that it doesn't pop up on their radar. And instead it's the bypass or whatever. And I fear that you make this connection, then it's going to pop up as that connection to make, and you get all that traffic. So I think there's a difference there. And I understand that, you know, the improvements on Main Street may displace some traffic. I thought that was kind of the whole point of the west side bypass, right? And there's still capacity on the west side bypass. And kind of the idea is we don't want to be drawing traffic from the west side bypass and putting it on Woodland. That's my feeling. We built the west side bypass to handle a lot of traffic. It's designed for that level of traffic. And I don't want to be displacing what otherwise would be displaced to west side bypass to Woodland. So that's my feeling about that.
Other discussion? Mr. Dowd?
Just to clarify, we're just talking about the new road here. The shared use path is not off the table.
Correct.
Okay.
Don't get me wrong, I agree with this little stretch that maybe it needs to come out. I think back to a little over 100+ years ago when they were trying to figure out what the traffic would be today in Washington, D.C. And the reason that was because they had forward-looking thinkers that didn't just exit out of a plan. If they would have just exited out of those plans, you think D.C. traffic is bad now. Imagine if there wasn't a beltway. Imagine if there wasn't that long-term vision. And we very well could be, right? We're not going to be as big a DC in my lifetime, but I would certainly hope never to hamper it too if it's, you know.
It's Willow Glen. That's the ring road.
No, I get it. I'm just,
Other discussion? Have a roll call vote on the amendment?
Counselor Hunter,
Aye.
Counselor Nunley,
yeah.
Counselor Carlson. Oh, sorry. Counselor Gabrielle.
I think it was there for a reason, but I'm struggling with changing it now. No.
Counselor Graham,
Aye.
Counselor Dowd,
As the mayor reminded us, it is a valid duck crossing, so no. I mean.
Counselor Fisher,
Aye.
Mayor Johnson.
Aye, motion carries. Back to the original motion. Now amended, striking out the road from 7th to Woodland. Any other discussion on that, Mr. Hunter?
I do have another motion. As you know, the second project that I've struggled with in this plan is the connection of Grandview over across the Stillwater. And my concern, similar, is that Reserve is already, a major traffic road. And I understand, the desire to release some of that traffic congestion. But on this stretch, we have Kidsport, we have the community college, we have our farmers market, which is part of our tourism draw along that stretch. And I don't want to see that become another reserve drive. And I think if you make that connection, you increase that possibility. And again, I heard that kind of roundabout would discourage that. Roundabouts slow people down. I think it's a good traffic calming. And if there's kind of an immediate next street over, it might displace traffic. But otherwise, I don't think a roundabout's going to do that much to discourage use on it. But I understand the need for the connection for the folks who live in the neighborhoods to get across to Kidsport for events or the college. I think that can happen by walking or biking. And I also heard through this process, which I wasn't aware of previously, that emergency services, their top priority actually is this connection. And so I take that very seriously. So I would imagine, which I believe would be a more affordable, because one of the reasons I understand this hasn't happened and is kind of not likely to happen anytime in the near future is this enormous cost and a difficulty in getting this done. And I think a slightly more affordable option would be to have the bridge be pedestrian bike only with emergency service, single lane emergency service access only. And therefore you address some of that east-west connection. You allow for emergency services, but you don't run the risk of turning it into a new reserve. So my motion would be to alter that project in that way.
Can you state the motion in that motion?
Yeah, I move to amend the original motion so that the Grandview Drive and Evergreen connection is a pedestrian and bicycle bridge with single lane emergency vehicle access only.
I have a second on that one.
I'll second for discussion.
Okay, got a second for discussion purposes? Now, you already spoke to your motion.
Yep.
So,
I'm good.
Mr. Graham?
Okay. No, you're not gonna get me on this one. The amount of traffic and congestion that this connection would make and clear up from the north and the south end, south being down in, let's say, maybe Idaho, and then north, obviously, Reserve, would be tremendous because it would serve a lot of residential use up and down Whitefish Stage. Currently, people living even to the north side of Whitefish Stage or even to the south side, anywhere along there, you're either going south or you're going north along Reserve, and it contributes a lot to the congestion. I mean, we talk about Reserve. A lot of traffic going down Reserve is also residential traffic going to Whitefish Stage. And then on the southern end of the issue here, you know, we have the shopping center there. And so a lot of people from Whitefish Stage, the way they get there is they go north to Reserve and come over and come back down south. It's a pretty vital connection. And, you know, I think there'd be a lot of people in that area that wouldn't be too keen on it, but this has been in the traffic plan for a long time.
Yes, as these subdivisions through here have come in, the right-of-way is already there. So there's no right-of-way at this point yet, but you also could see that it's undeveloped. Actually, and for this area to develop, that connection is somewhat critical as well because you don't have a lot of access into here, so when it does develop, but, yes,
I
it's
understand
been
the
planned, it's
resistance.
part of the transportation
I
plan.
understand the resistance that people would have to go through and do that because it would probably incorporate a lot of change. But, you know, one of the things we always go through and we see is there's resistance to some stuff that goes through and happens with some of the, you know, development projects that we have and everything. They're going to go through and create new connections. And one of the things that I go through and think about is I'm like, it's going to create this new connection. You're fighting it. You may not want to use it. You know, so I think of any of the connections we're going through and we're talking about in this plan, I think this one's the most vital. So that's my say.
And something important to me, thank you, Your Honor. Unlike what we just did with the east side on Woodland, these folks have known this for years. They bought this property knowing these easements were set aside. My mother was one of them. They've known this was coming, a much different scenario than the other neighborhoods. So I can't quite get there on this one.
Mr. Nunley?
Thank you, Your Honor. I do, well, I can see my house from here. I can almost see the mayor's house. I can almost see your house. Well, I think I can see your house actually, Carrie. Chad, I can almost see your house. So it does impact a number of us up here. And I've driven the big red vehicles. I've driven the fast little patrol cars. I know how much that would help from an emergency services standpoint, but also know how much it would take that load off of Whitefish Stage where there's already problems on Whitefish Stage. It would take the load off a lot of these roads, and I think it would be better served. Plus it comes in right at the back of the hospital. I see so many benefits to it. I can't see not doing it. If you're going to punch something through for a shared use path, you might as well punch through the road and actually take the load off of those other roads. So I'll support this.
As I look through the connection down to Evergreen, we look at the expansion of Reserve ending at the top of the hill before it goes down to the east and crosses the river. One of the key points was, okay, the cost of another river crossing, and then the acquisition of right-of-way as you get through to that intersection of Reserve and LaSalle. This, actually cutting through Evergreen, creates another access point for Evergreen to get up through here, and for people from here to get to Evergreen, and reduce some of that traffic to maybe forego that expansion on that east side of Evergreen. So it'd be interesting to see if MDOT actually looks at this as, wow, this would help solve some of our problems that we're gonna face down there that create an almost unbearable intersection at LaSalle and Reserve. I struggle with you on this one. I'm shocked you got a second for discussion, but it's been.
I thought the discussion was worth.
No, it was good to have.
Especially for Mr. Hunter, so.
Yep. So, any other discussion? Roll call vote on the amendment?
Counselor Hunter?
Aye.
Counselor Nunley?
No.
Counselor Gabrielle?
No.
Counselor Graham?
No.
Counselor Dowd?
No.
Counselor Fisher?
No.
Mayor Johnson?
No. Motion fails. Back to the original motion as amended prior. Any other discussion?
No, I'm done.
Okay, I'm going to call for a roll call vote on Resolution 6213 as amended.
Counselor Hunter?
Aye.
Counselor Nunley?
Aye.
Counselor Gabrielle?
Aye.
Counselor Graham?
Aye.
Counselor Dowd?
Aye.
Counselor Fisher?
Aye.
Mayor Johnson?
Aye, motion carries. City manager report.
Yeah, just a few things, let you know what's coming up on some upcoming council meetings and work sessions. We're gonna be talking about the lead and copper rule revision and what that means for us and where we are with the lead service inventory and costs associated with that. And then we have budget meetings coming up here at the.
What?
Yeah.
Already?
Yeah, it's August, yeah. And that's all I have, Your Honor.
Okay, anything from council? Mr. Hunter?
Thank you, Your Honor. I just want to respond to one of the public comment we received tonight. Obviously, it's a topic we've talked a lot about, but I think at this point, if people are still talking about the warming center not providing other services that help people out of homelessness, they either are not listening, clearly have never visited the warming center and spoken with them, or just are so set in a bias against them that because that just clearly isn't the case. It's been stated repeatedly, and if you ever go down and talk to them and visit the center, it's clear that they are doing more than just offering a bed. And so I'm a little bit tired of hearing that, and didn't appreciate hearing that tonight and during public comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hunter. Mr. Dowd?
I was driving back from Great Falls today and over Highway 2 and was stopped for about an hour while we waited for, well, maybe a half hour, while we waited for Life Flight to come in and pick up somebody that was in a horrible motorcycle accident. And I just would like to remind people that they already know this, but something like that makes you realize it's more important to get there than it is to get there fast. And you just slow down and be aware that you're going to be driving with a bunch of people on vacation with their trailers, and just be patient.
Mr. Nutt?
Oh.
Mr. Graham, I'm just gonna try to work.
I was really glad to hear the inclusion of Mini Rivers going to be going into Western. So to me, that's good news.
Can we backtrack? I just want to say how impressive I was with Mr. Keenan. I didn't tell him when he was here, but all that knowledge, I've heard all these rumors of this 300 million is just going to meetings at Fairmont Hot Springs. That man knows his stuff. That was quite a presentation, very educational. Just so glad that whoever made that invitation to get him in here learned an awful lot tonight. Impressive. Sorry about that.
You're welcome.
I was going to say.
Mr. Nunnally?
Thank you, Your Honor. Well, it's that time of year. I just want to, anybody out there listening, want to come down Friday at 10 o'clock down Main Street. We are bringing back the fair parade this year with United Way's help. So I really want to thank the United Way for stepping up and doing that. Then we are starting in with Saturday with dog shows, horse shows, Sunday load in, and then next week is the Northwest Montana Fair. So hope to see you all there. Get your tickets now if you haven't, because Beach Boys concerts are going quick.
So burnouts? Can we do burnouts in the parade? You gonna do burnouts? Or
No.
Okay. Ms. Gabriel, do you have anything?
Yeah, I also enjoyed Mr. Keenan's presentation, and I worked in youth drug and alcohol prevention for 10 years, and we were one of the sacrifices of that legislation. And our nonprofit did all of that work with kids, and that's how I met Chief Venezio originally when he was a school resource officer, and we did really good work, and all of our money was cut, so that nonprofit completely went away. And it's tragic. And now we get to reap the benefits of that and a society where we don't have those services. So unfortunately, and this is no fault of his, I know how hard he fought for things, but unfortunately, we now get to start from ground zero and rebuild what was torn down. So I hope that's a lesson to us, as we move forward on these kinds of things that, and I know Mr. Waterman has also been a very good advocate in this area. So I look forward to their work and seeing those things rebuilt. I'm just sorry it had to happen, that it had to happen to be rebuilt. So I was a little bummed when all that happened.
Well said. It was a bummer when it
I have a
happened.
lot more to say.
I
but
bet you do.
I'll stop right there.
I've got a couple comments, one of them at my favorite target, last session's legislature. Mr. Nygren, you handed me a couple books this evening, and just want to show everybody, this was Montana's 2021 land use and planning statutes. Maybe quarter-inch thick, roughly. And we have a Republican governor, Republican Senate, Republican legislature in the House. And typically, I remember growing up, Republicans were the ones who wanted to deregulate, reduce regulations, remove red tape. Great idea. So here's the 2023. It's about 2.5 times as thick. This is what we're working with now at the city level because once again, Helena has decided they know better than us. They know better than our community and how we should do things within our own town. So they want to shove things down our throat without us being able to decide them in the light of day with our neighbors. Not real pleased, but that's the playing field we have. And the last thing I have, George Washington was our first president. When he stepped out of public office, a lot of people were asking him to serve one more term. Do it for the good of the country. And his comments were largely, for the good of the country, I cannot do another term. And as he said when he stepped out of office, this quote with a small paraphrase in the second word, however, political parties may now and then answer popular ends. They are likely in the course of time and things to become potent engines by which cunning, ambitious, and unprincipled men will be enabled to subvert the power of the people and to usurp for themselves the reins of government, destroying afterwards the very engines which have lifted them to unjust dominion. Think about that as we look at the election in 2024. What promises are going to be made to buy a vote? I see promises made at the state level. I see pressure put on from parties on both sides to do certain things, to let candidates represent the parties, not the people. I really hope that George Washington didn't foretell the end of this country because people want more from the government. They want more free stuff. They want things handed to them. Because that's what we've been getting to the tune of $36 trillion now. And I think that the day of reckoning is coming soon with that. But just remember, it's the power of the people. It's not power of the party. Because as I've shown you here, the party that wants to deregulate, they sure love to regulate all of a sudden. And who knows what else is coming. Please, take the power back at the lowest level we can, and that's at the people. Tell the politicians enough of this party garbage. You represent us, not the people who donate millions and billions of dollars, not the people who control social media and edit posts or whatever. You represent us. And until we, the people, start doing that, we will fail as a country because our leaders have their own self-interest at their best heart, not ours.
Here, here.